Once upon a time, deep within the forest of whispering pines, lived a fearsome dragon named Ignis. Its scales were as red as rubies. Its eyes burned with the fury of 1,000 suns, and its roar could shake the very foundations of the nearby village of Oakhaven. For years, Ignis terrorized the villagers, demanding tribute in the form of livestock and gold, and anyone who defied him was met with the terrible consequences. One such person was Sir Gideon, a valiant knight who had sworn to protect Oakhaven and its people. After many failed attempts to slay the beast, he finally managed to defeat it, slaying the dragon and freeing the village from its reign of terror. He was celebrated as a hero, and for a while, everything was good. But soon strange things started happening. Gideon began seeing the lifeless eyes of the slain dragon staring back at him from the darkest corners of his imagination. And every night he was awoken by the mournful cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of his soul. At first, he dismissed these as mere tricks of his memory, trying to convince himself that he was just mourning the loss of a great beast he had slain in battle. But as time went on, the visions became more vivid, the cries more frequent, and the dragon's presence more suffocating. He realized then that the spirit of the dragon was haunting him. And so our story begins. Gideon awoke with a gasp, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. The dream, or perhaps nightmare, would be a more accurate term, lingered in his mind, the charred visage of Ingress seared into his memory. The knight sat up on his bed, his armor clanking softly in the stillness of the night. His chamber was dark, the only light filtering in from the sliver of a moon hanging in the inky sky. Through the window, the gnarled branches of the whispering pines forest danced like skeletal fingers. It had been 5 nights since he had slain the dragon, 5 nights since his victory over Ignis, the beast that had plagued Oakhaven for generations. 5 nights of tormented sleep, of fevered dreams and haunted waking hours. Each night he dreamt of fire and death, of the dragon's anguished roar as it breathed its last. And each morning he awoke with the phantom smell of singed flesh heavy in his nostrils, as if the memory of the slain beast still lingered in his chamber. Gideon wasn't a superstitious man. He understood the difference between courage and foolhardiness, between honor and recklessness. But lately, he'd begun to question his valor. Was slaying Ingersoll, a dragon whose reign of terror had spanned decades, truly an accomplishment or a curse? For since that fateful day, his life had become a torment. The villagers, once jubilant at their deliverance, now viewed him with a mixture of fear and suspicion. Their savior had become a monster in their eyes. The townsfolk whispered tales of how Gideon, driven mad by the dragon's spirit, had started acting erratically, how he spoke in his sleep and sometimes seemed not to hear when addressed. His fellow knights, too, had distanced themselves from him, their camaraderie turning into wary silence. In the flickering lamplight, the faces of his comrades had become obscured, their expressions twisted into grotesque masks of suspicion and fear. Even King Alaric, who had knighted him and bestowed upon him the honor of the realm's best knight, seemed hesitant in his praise. And then there were the nightmares, vivid and inescapable, which made each night a battle against the darkness within his own mind. He missed the companionship of his men, the camaraderie of shared meals and stories around a crackling fire. He missed the simple joys of a life before his victory, a life of peace, a life free from the specter of dragons. Was this what victory tasted like? Was this the burden of heroism? Alone in his chamber, Gideon reached for his sword hilt, the cold steel a familiar comfort in his clammy hand. The ornate blade, a gift from the king on the occasion of his knighthood, was as much a symbol of his fall as it was a reminder of his past glory. Now it felt like a brand, searing his shame into his very bones. He left his chamber, the soft padding of his leather boots on the stone floor echoing his heavy steps. As he made his way through the castle corridors, he could feel the eyes of the castle's inhabitants boring into his back. He was a marked man, a pariah within a kingdom that once celebrated him. The library was his sanctuary, a place where the ghosts of the past couldn't reach him. Surrounded by ancient tomes, he felt a sense of solace. But even here, the dragon's presence seemed to follow him. Ignis's burning eyes, staring up at him from the faded illustrations in the ancient texts. As he delved deeper into the musty pages, he came across an inscription detailing the slaying of a dragon named Israfel. The villagers' tales of Ignis matched the legend, but there was something different here, something the villagers hadn't mentioned. The inscription spoke of a ritual, a way to appease the dragon's spirit after its death. According to the ancient text, a dragon-ace spirit could be laid to rest only by returning to the place of its defeat and performing a ritual of remembrance. With newfound determination, Gideon set out for the Whispering Pines forest, the place where he had slain Ingersoll. A forest was as dark and foreboding as he remembered, the gnarled branches of the pines forming a canopy overhead that blocked out the sun. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, and the ground was littered with the skeletons of the dragon's victims. As he walked, he could feel the weight of Ingersoll's spirit pressing down on him, a tangible presence that seemed to mock his every step. Finally, he reached the clearing where the battle had taken place. The charred remains of Ignis's body lay in the center, a grim testament to the ferocity of the fight. Taking a deep breath, Gideon began the ritual. He spoke words of remembrance, honoring the dragon's memory and acknowledging its suffering. He told the story of Ignis, the terror it had inflicted, the lives it had taken, and the hero who had slain it. His voice echoed through the silent trees, carrying with it the weight of centuries of fear and remembrance. As he spoke, he could feel the dragon's spirit stirring, Ignis's essence coalescing from the ether, taking shape in the clearing. When Gideon finished his tale, the dragon's spirit emerged, a towering silhouette against the darkening sky. It was immense, its form shifting and shimmering like heat haze. Fear threatened to overwhelm Gideon, but he stood his ground. He had slain Ingersoll once. He could do it again. Drawing his sword, he charged forward, the steel singing as it cut through the air. The dragon's spirit roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the forest. But this time, instead of attacking, it dodged, its spectral form weaving and bobbing just out of Gideon's reach. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the dragon's spirit vanished. Leaving Gideon alone in the clearing, the knight collapsed, his sword clattering to the forest floor. He had faced down a dragon, confronted the embodiment of terror itself, and lived to tell the tale. The villagers, when they heard his story, looked at him differently. They saw not a monster, but a hero burdened by the very thing he had tried to save them from. Understanding dawned in their eyes, replacing their fear with gratitude and respect. Slowly, Gideon began to heal, not just his battered body, but his broken spirit as well. The nightmares didn't vanish entirely, but their frequency lessened. And in their place, he began to have dreams, not of fire and death, but of a sky filled with dragons, soaring majestically on currents of wind.